Welcome into this episode of How to Ride a Roller Coaster. I'm David Ezell, and tonight I'm joined by Mark Murphy. Mark is the CEO of Northeast Private Client Group. He's also an accomplished author, speaker, and motivator who's revolutionizing the financial planning and wealth management industry. What's going on?
First of all, David, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate your analogy on roller coaster because it makes me think back to like when I first started. I try not to think about that too often, but I think being an entrepreneur, I'd say about the first 3 years, could be a little shorter, could be a little longer, is about the closest thing to death you'll ever experience. But for those people that can have the drive and they can have the focus and they can fall in love with the mundane and they can do all the things necessary to succeed, they will have a life that is second to none. Not only in terms of the wealth they create, but in terms of the joy that they get to have in life.
Mark, I think you're spot on. We were talking a little bit before we hit record tonight. I had an agency back in like 2018. My wife and I, COVID kind of came in and then we welcomed our first kid into the world. And I mean, I remember waking up one morning and it was just the stress of everything. And this was probably 6 or 9 months in. I had a circular spot on the back of my head that was completely bald. There was no hair in the bed. I have no idea, but I mean, it was just so much stress, because it really is the ups and downs, and every day it's like, I almost got this client, didn't get the client, starting back over. So I think you're right. That especially those first 2 and 3 years is just falling in love with the process, understanding everything that's needed. And so as we dive into that, let's tell people a little bit more about yourself, how you kind of got to where you are, and then we'll kind of back channel it from there.
I describe myself as a key business strategist, critical thinker, financial advisor to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinking people. And I think when you sit down and I think that whoever asks the best questions wins. Albert Einstein had this quote, which I thought was amazing for a young person. He talked about don't try to be successful. He said try to create value. And I think try to wake up creating more value than anybody else. And I think that generally comes because there's an expression in our office we always say, the good ones tell, the great ones ask. And if you can ask powerful questions, that's how you learn. And that's how you then provide the information that where people will tell you what they want. And then if you can help solve that need in both elegance and excellence, that's the beginning of a good business.
Man, I think you're spot on with that. I think a lot of times whenever you get started with something, so much of it is, I make X amount in my day job right now, but I really want to start my own thing. How can I get back up to that level so that I'll feel comfortable, because you kind of hit a little bit of a downslide there. You jump off with that foot into entrepreneurship, starting your own thing, and maybe you can't pay yourself for a little while as you're building up, getting a client base and all that. But I love how you said that. If you can keep that focus on serving and bringing value first, you're going to start to build that community and you're going to start to have that solid footing that everything else starts to build on.
Yeah, the number one job, David, of an entrepreneur is to protect his or her confidence. Ultimately, and I don't mean hubris. I mean, hubris is the ruination of all who have it. And, you want to be humble but confident. But I think that ultimately you can't allow other people to rent space in your head. And then ultimately I think you have to trust as an entrepreneur. You have to get all the information possible but be ready to pull the trigger and make a business decision and trust your gut. And I think that the idea is that ultimately I think that the number one reason why entrepreneurs fail or successful businesses wind up failing is because they've lost their confidence. They've lost their mojo. I think confidence is everything in life. Yeah. And I think you have to have that entrepreneurial mindset. I mean, we have dozens of different things of ways we think. But ultimately, I think also is that failure for an entrepreneur is just another form of market research. Failure just means you're one step closer to success most of the time.
Love that.
And so the idea is that ultimately I think that most people did not hit it out of the park the first time they tried something. And so what I always think is you might have done 1 or 2 or 3 things or even more that did not work. But if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have done those other things that helped you make tens of millions of dollars.
Exactly right. Do you feel like the generation, say, 2000 and from from 2000 to now, do you feel like that generation, myself included, that is maybe more part of like that, the bubble in Silicon Valley where you see these companies that are just getting funded through the roof, and it kind of changed maybe that perception of what entrepreneurship is from a kind of putting it in like the hero standpoint, as opposed to like what you said, where it's really about the work. It's really about the value that you can provide. It's not so much about what it looks like at the very end of it. It doesn't show all the peaks and valleys. Do you feel like there's a little bit of a change maybe that's come in the last 20 years or so?
We have a lot of really smart people from top schools that work with us. They're all in their 20s and in their 30s. And I think that the thing that what that generation is missing, and part of it is COVID, part of it, most of it I think is, that everybody wants to live on their phone with everything, is that ultimately I think the number one skill that people have, and I think certainly entrepreneurs have, is the power to influence. And so when you take a look at the 4 different types of intelligence, David, you'll find that your generation, like many other generations, the best people have high IQ. They're very smart people. You have to be smart, but you don't have to be a genius. You have to be smart enough. But I think living on your phone, living on Twitter or X, or living on Instagram and the like, the other types of intelligence that I think are not even as important, maybe more important than IQ, is most people have heard of EQ. Can I read the room? Is David with me? Is David angry? Is David sad? You find so many people that don't have that emotional quotient. They can really learn to read a room. And so that's why they fail, because they've never done that. They've only been in their room playing video games.
Yeah.
The third kind of intelligence is social quotient. Since they've lived in their bedrooms, they don't have the ability to socialize as well as past generations, where they can get along and get in a room and and be able to socialize in a way that allows them to not only have an enjoyable experience but the power to influence.
Right.
And then the intelligence that I look for more than any other, because you have to have them all, but I think to be really successful, to be elite. But the one that I think is very underrated is AQ, which is adversity quotient. And so the idea is when everything's going great, everybody is happy. Everything's it's Shangri-La. But when something hits the skids, you've got to be able to turn that lemon into lemonade. You've got to be able to flip the script and flip the table and turn that problem into an opportunity. And I think when you spent that time, just being on your phone or just being on social media, I think that's a skill that if you can develop in that generation. I don't believe, David, in competition. I believe in differentiation. But if you can help develop and enhance those types of intelligence, you have a competitive advantage and you can differentiate yourself from anybody on the planet, not just your generation, but anybody.
Mark, I think you're spot on. I think being in front of the phone, COVID as well, for the last 2 or 3 years or whatnot, that has kind of forced us inside. But that has really kind of had that different mindset and everything else, where people are a little bit more afraid to be able to go to networking events and walk up to a crowd of people that they don't know, and bring their authentic selves. Is there anything that you would say now to maybe somebody who doesn't have those things, but they want to be the best version of themselves? They want to be the entrepreneur that can do those things. Are there things that you think that they could just start to work on to start to enhance some of those things, to where when things aren't going great, they can think differently and say, oh, well, the house isn't on fire. I just need to rethink of how we're doing things or how I'm handling it.
I think that the other issue is I am proud to say that we sell financial service products and services and other things like that. But I think the mindset also for people that are venturing into that world is that, and believe me, I believe hubris is the ruination of all who have it. You must be humble and confident. I said that. But I think that the mindset should be, regardless of whatever the situation is, you always want to be the buyer, not the seller. You want to give that person the opportunity to have the David Ezell experience. And so the idea is not in an arrogant way, but in a way that you're comfortable in who you are in that social situation, and you're giving them the opportunity. And by the way, not every deal is going to get done. Not every person is going to like you. At the end of the day, does it really matter?
Nope.
Just that ultimately, I think that I think having done this so long and still having as much energy as I do, it's because it does not take a lot of energy to be who you are. And so I just encourage people not to show up with their radio voice or their podcast voice or their representative of somebody who they think they are. I think just show up and be you. And I think for the most part that I think vulnerability is a superpower. And you come there not arrogant or not all boastful, but you come there just as your true self. And I think when you start to do that and show up as yourself everywhere, it's amazing how the world, starts treating you that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, I couldn't say that any better. It does feel like kind of the world that we live in now, everybody, that's the first place that they go. When you're trying to build a brand for yourself, you're trying to find your voice in a crowded space. It's you see other people that you want to kind of emulate and whatnot. So maybe you pull a little bit from this, pull a little bit from that. And maybe that's fine just in the way that you deliver or something. But at the end, you want to be yourself. You want to get the Mark Murphy experience because you're going to be able to bring your 100% best self to that experience because you're not trying to be something else. They're getting you and you have that full value in them. Like you said, your main focus is on them. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you kind of got to where you are now.
In Suffern, New York, and was lucky enough to go to Indiana University to the Kelley School of Business to get a finance degree and do a lot of work in calculus and accounting. And in fact, I'm so proud. In fact, I've just been elected to the national board of the varsity club at Indiana, and it's been such an important part of my life that Bloomington, Indiana, is such my happy place.
Awesome.
That I've just been so fortunate to get now an opportunity to now continue to give back to the school. And we have 2 of our 5 kids there, and we might have a 3rd one there next year.
Okay.
And I just and all I can tell you is that I find myself I'm always at my best when I'm serving others. And all we want to do is just give ourselves the opportunity to improve and change the lives for the better of all the people we touch. And this is just an opportunity that now I get to serve even more.
Man. And so is that kind of where the entrepreneurship tie-in goes? I mean, is that where you just kind of, you see that group, the entrepreneurs that have the ideas, that want to grow and that want to build? And is that where you're just kind of naturally drawn to is, man, I have so much that I can impart there?
Well, I first of all, I think I'm coachable. I think I'm employable. But my joke always is most entrepreneurial people are it's just a group of unemployable people that they would only be successful working for themselves.
Right.
But I think the idea is that ultimately, if you're going to put I think that there's a fallacy out there that by working for somebody else or working in an environment, in the 1940s or 50s, you might have gotten a job with a Fortune 500 company, and there was some sort of unspoken covenant that if you stayed and did a good job and did the right thing, you'd be there for the rest of your life. It was kind of cradle to grave from the day you started to the day you retired. And I think the idea is that I think people that are not entrepreneurs are taking a lot more risk than people who are actually willing to go out there and put it on the line and put their capital and their bodies and themselves on the line every day, because I think you're doing it either way. You might as well disproportionately share in the risk. You might as well take the risk because I think you're taking it anyway, and you might as well get the rewards. Okay. And I think that, ultimately, I think that, I've heard other people say it, but I think that, sometimes a paycheck is just a bribe to take away your dream.
When it comes to how entrepreneurs, like when you work with them and when it comes to thinking about wealth, how do you help them just kind of change that mindset of the way that they think about money, about wealth, about generational wealth, any of that type of thing? Do you ever see like the same blockers? Or is each case just kind of different based on who it is?
There's commonalities, but there are commonalities that are different in entrepreneurial people in terms of what they're doing. But I think ultimately the number one reason why they fail is they don't have cash confidence, meaning they don't have enough liquidity behind them to either take advantage of opportunities or to withstand emergencies. Yeah. And so ultimately undercapitalized companies is the number one reason I think that they fail. And then the other thing you also have is the best investments entrepreneurs make is when they invest in themselves. Bar none. If you only had $1 to invest, you would want to invest it in yourself. Yeah. I don't think there's any other place you'd want to put it.
Yeah. Do you see, because there is kind of that change now, like you mentioned, do you see some of those fears starting to be lifted? where people will start to say a little bit more frequently, I'm ready to jump out there and do my own thing. I'm ready to do it. Because it does kind of feel like, with the advent of the internet and everything, how it is now, the world has just become a smaller place. You can start an Etsy store tomorrow. You can, start an e-commerce store. So a lot of people are starting to do things on the side that hopefully grow into something that they can do full time. Do you see that starting to be the case where more and more people are starting to jump out? Or is it just that they're trying to not maybe have the same financial tiptoe that they're currently in, maybe trying to change their current situation?
The eureka moment that happens for most people that are business owners is they say, well, I own a business. So you'll go to a room of people that own their business. Say, how many people in the room think they're entrepreneurs? And most of the hands go up. But in my experience, the overwhelming majority of them, maybe better than 90% of them, are not business owners. They've got a well-paying job. They're getting paid for what they do, not what they know. And so I think a lot of our processes involved is just trying to help people go from the great artist to the great CEO. To get paid for what you know, and not rather than what you do. And I think there's a couple of rules that we have. Number one is your money has to work when you sleep, and the other thing is your business has to produce revenue when you're not there.
Yeah.
And I think because if it's just dependent upon you, that to me is a job, and sometimes it's a very good paying job, but it's still a job, and you don't have the freedom to be in creation and fascination mode.
Yeah, no, I mean you're right on it. It doesn't matter what it is. If it stops when you're not there or while you're sleeping, then it is a paycheck. How do you help entrepreneurs, especially, just kind of start to change that mindset when it comes to money? We've talked a little bit about liquidity and how that is kind of the gasoline and the oxygen of everything, but it always kind of feels to me, the entrepreneurs that I've talked with in the past, that finances and especially cash flow feel like this one thing that they just kind of can't seem to get a handle on. 1 month might be great. 1 month might be bad. It's everything else comes first. How can I market? How can I spend money on Google? Whatever the case is, as opposed to sitting down and figuring out how to really get your cash flow straight so that it can help propel you for the next 6 months, 9 months, whatever.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is early in my career, I would take people that were in great debt. I'd show them how to grow their business. I'd show them how to do things. And I thought I did a great job. And what I did is I really hurt them. Because if I doubled or tripled their business and they didn't have good values around money, I just made their problems. If I doubled their business, I quintupled their problems. Because there was just more money to create problems with. And so, I've made things very, very simple in terms of trying to create rules or other things that are there. There's only two things. There's expenses, and if you're an expense, you're always on the chopping block. And if you're an investment, as long as I can get a 4 or 5 to 1 return on my money or more, I should be open to any investment. And then on top of that, I think that one of the things that I would also say, and this may sound pedantic, particularly to successful people, is there's really only 3 things you can do with your money.
Interesting.
You can save it, you can pay your bills, or you can spend it wildly. Yeah. And it does not matter how much money you make. If you don't do it in that order, you'll never have any money to save. And so the idea is, I've sort of made it a point is that I always have taken 25% of what I've made, and I think the right number is probably for most people, 15%, let's call it as a minimum, but I always try to take 25. I pay my bills, and then whatever's left, I spend it like a drunken sailor. I am wild with my spending because I think I've given myself the permission slip to do some extraordinary things, not only for myself and my family, but for other people, because I've taken care of business first.
Love that.
It may sound very, very simple, but I think ultimately it's cash confidence and it's feeding your money machine. And then the other thing, you then start to get to the next level of things where there's really, as somebody who manages not millions of dollars, but billions of dollars, there's dozens of asset classes. But for our purposes, there's really only 2. And we call them paychecks or either free capital or play checks. So what we want people to do is get a series of assets that will give them either a guaranteed or highly reliable stream of income to replace their income at their company. And then we want them to have another series of assets where they can spend it, they can save it, they can give it away. But the important thing is it will not be responsible for producing income for their family. So if you have both paychecks and play checks, you have you have financial freedom, but there's still one more level. If you can have earned income in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, or 80s, when all your friends are worried about living too long or going early bird specials or drinking domestic beer instead of imported beer, you're a net saver creating multi-generational wealth. And so, the idea is that it's good values and good strategies around money. And I think you're right. So few people have that.
Yeah.
And I think they don't make decisions. They make decisions based on how much money's in the checkbook rather than what's the right investment for them in their business.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. It is difficult. It does take a little bit of time, but it's all about really creating that framework, understanding what you want to do so that you can be able to help other people while also be able to help your family, help yourself because you've worked so hard for things, but also know that you're doing that after everything else has been taken care of. It does kind of take some of that stress off. So what was that pivotal moment for you when your mindset kind of shifted and you started doing things on your own and really started, building things out the Mark Murphy way?
I mean, there's so many things. It's been so long, or so much is there. But I think what I realized that I wanted to grow a business, but I realized that you don't really grow a business; you grow people. And when the people that worked for me were as or even more important than our clients, that's when our business took off, because I'm only one person, and so I had to create people that could, I could only grow and pour and invest in people. Or if not, I was just a one-man band. I had that job I described.
Yeah.
I could not leverage or scale my business until I really poured and invested in people. And in many cases, I did not expect a return immediately. I needed to invest until I could get a return in those folks. And I think that was sort of the turning point. And then there's a book, that even took it to another level, that was written by Gino Wickman called Traction. I don't know if you've read it. But it made it very clear, very simple about how we could run our business through the entrepreneurial operating system. And that was that if somebody was going to work in our company or I was going to interview somebody in our company, they had to not be a yes to these three questions. They had to be a hell yeah. And the three questions are GWC. Do they get what we want? Do they get what we're doing and why we're different? The W is, do they want to be with us, not because it's 5 minutes from their house or they don't have a better opportunity. Do they really want to be with us? And the C is, with proper training, do they have the capability to do the job? So they got to be a hell yeah to get it, want to have capability. And then what I did is I created, David, my 7 core values. It could have been 5, it could have been 4, it could have been 6. There's no magic about 7. The important thing is they weren't the right core values. They just happen to be my core values. And so literally when I'm interviewing somebody or I'm grading somebody that works for me on our core values, I'll give you an example. One of our core values is we want to not only create an experience, we want to create a wow experience for every client. So if you're going to work at Northeast Private Client Group, if you don't wake up jazzed every day about creating that experience, you are going to be miserable here. And the people outside my office are going to hate your guts. You're going to be a total failure. And you go through that stuff. So if you have people that get it, want to have capability, and they have your core values, that's an unstoppable team. And having said that, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
Yep.
Ultimately, they're a cancer to the organization. You always want to get with less, be with less people that have your back than people that you throw bodies at a problem. And the telltale phrases I'll hear from people: the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, or it's hard to find that position, or it's good enough. Well, it's not good enough.
Yep.
They're eating your organization up from the inside. But you want people where everybody has those core values and everybody is working in the same direction.
That's exactly right. My wife and I, we read a book not long ago, and somebody talked about aligning vectors. So everything drives to one spot. Everybody's rowing in the same direction. There's not somebody out here that thinks that the company is about this or going this direction and, pulling everything else away. And like you said, that takes time, but that's what I love so much about the world of brand, because the brand is what people say about your company when you're not in the room. You can say all you want. You can spend all the ad revenue and everything to have your tagline out there. But when you leave the room and there's your clients or potential clients, talking about your company, what are they saying? Because that's what the company really is. And I think the way that you're doing it is the right way. You focus on having those people on your team that believe what you believe, want to go where you want to go, and you have a limited number of seats on that rocket. You say, look, we're going to the moon. This is how we're going to get there. This is how we treat our customers every single day without fail. And there's only 11 more seats. So buckle up because we're going to go, and I feel like those are those companies that you want to be a part of, because those are the ones that treat you how you want to be treated. Because like you said, they're not just trying to say, hey, I have a job open. Do you need a job? It's more of, I have an opportunity for you to join a team that is going to be exactly what you want, if this is what you're looking for. So I love the fact that the answers to those three questions can't just be a yeah, because a yeah is really easy to get when you don't have a job. So you automatically kind of weed some out right there. That's fantastic. And I'll make sure to link that book by Gino Wickman, Traction. I'll make sure to have that in the link in the description so people can go check that out.
By the way, there's two questions that I probably say ad nauseum. One you just said. I talk to people in our organization. I always say, what do you want people to say about you? Exactly what you said. If somebody's going to talk about you, and what would people be saying? And would you be proud of that?
Yeah.
And the other thing I also say to them is, I always talk to our folks and I say, what are you willing to do that you're not doing now to have what you don't have?
That's a good one.
And so ultimately, I think that's there. But I also think, when you talk about culture you build, part of the culture, I think, it comes for a couple of things. One is, I think we have a culture where I've tried to brainwash people to understand that if we do what we do well, we will win every time. And once you have belief in that organization that we do that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's about building an unstoppable force. And it's amazing how, when you get people aligned around a concept, how it's far more powerful than the individual parts. That's total synergy, where 1 + 1 = 3, and that's the kind of organization you want. And that's why you've got to protect your culture, like it's it's the most important thing, because it's everything.
Oh, it is everything. Everything. I mean, to me, it's almost kind of like the bank. You have to have so many more deposits, because all it takes is that one withdrawal. And like you mentioned, that could be an employee that doesn't get it. Maybe it was a wrong hire, something along the way, but it's like you said, it's kind of eating the culture from the inside. It could be one bad customer experience, but all of a sudden that withdrawal just seems like it's so much more, even after all the deposits. So every single thing, like you mentioned, it's all about keeping that culture and that brand. You have to think about it every single day. It has to be part of the day-to-day operation of how we do it. It's not just, this is how our team operates, this is what working here is like. It has to really be that. It has to be authentic. It can't just be a charade, and then when people show up on Monday, it's like, well, this doesn't match what I signed up for. Because if it's inauthentic there, it's going to be inauthentic out in public. So it has to really be authentic to yourself. So I think everything that you mentioned, starting with your own personal self, how can you bring the best version of yourself to that? And if you can get that to align to the company that you want to build, and you can find those people that also align to that, and they're bringing their best version of themselves, that's the recipe.
I also think the other thing too is what entrepreneurs also do, that everybody's worried about, how do I get more business? How do I get more introductions, more referrals, more business, more, whatever your business is, and whatever you call it. But I always think what I want to do is I want to give more referrals. Ultimately, if you don't spend weeks or months or even years, but decades pouring into other people, and really really giving into people, you will have an army of people that want to come back to you.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that people don't see, they focus so narrowly on what they're getting. They never focus on what they're giving. And ultimately, when you wind up being a net giver, that's where the most successful people are. Yeah. Maybe in the beginning, somebody who's taking advantage of you maybe gets a little slight edge, or, sometimes, they in a very temporary basis, but long term, that's not a sustainable model. The sustainable model is people are attracted to folks that want to make a difference in their lives. And I think that's something else sometimes you lose, particularly early in your career for entrepreneurial people, where maybe they don't have enough capital, or they need that sale, or they need that client, or they need that customer, and you have to temper that. And I think you have to temper that. But I think if you can get past that, it's amazing how the world will shift very quickly in your favor. The skies will shift, and you'll go from clouds to sun, pretty quickly.
Yep. And you nailed it. I mean, that sales pitch when you're really needing to close that sale because your bank account is on zero, so you really need to close that sale. That sales pitch sounds a lot different when you're in that mindset as opposed to in the giving mindset, and your customers can feel that, they can sense that. So yeah, I mean, I think everything should, like you said, I mean, it should start with the giving first.
It's almost disarming to people, that they're there, because everyone goes through, as a brand guy, and obviously with your background, and on our phones in the last week, I've probably had 50 people that called me, texted me, or emailed me trying to sell me something. It could be 100 people.
Yeah.
So if everyone's going through that sales vertical, how do you go through the strategy vertical? How do you go through the giving vertical? How do you go through something that differentiates you from other folks? And then I think it becomes also very strategic. I always think, I played competitive chess growing up. I'm a master's bridge player.
Wow.
So I always thought 8 moves ahead or 13 tricks ahead. And so I always say, well, why would we solve one problem when we could solve 3 or 4 at the same time? That it's that strategic thinking where you're anticipating the next move. I think that's what the best entrepreneurs do.
That's great.
And I think the other thing you also find that, everybody wants the brass ring. They want to win the trophy. They want to make the money. They want to get the title and the recognition. But it is amazing how so many people want to have that, but are not willing to put the effort in necessarily to do that. That ultimately, in many ways, I'm always kind of dumbfounded where people who put in a mediocre effort, or even a good effort, or sometimes a very good or excellent effort, they think they're elite.
Yeah.
And they're not. And I think that part of it is, I think you've got to show people what a great job looks like. I think part of the world is there. I think you've got to, that although I think you want to live a balanced life and that you want health and wealth and love and purpose, I think as an entrepreneur you want to give themselves a permission for at least a short period of time to be out of balance or obsessed.
Yeah.
You look at, let's call it, famous athletes. Tom Brady did some things with his diet and his body that allowed him to play in the NFL till age 46.
Right.
When most quarterbacks were out of the league by 30 or 31 or 32. And I think if you see the great people in business, or the great folks, they have to be a little bit obsessed for a period of time if you truly want to be great. If you truly you got to be willing to do things that other people are not willing to do, at least at some point.
Yep. I think you're right on. And Mark, I definitely don't want to leave out your book. I want to talk about that some more as well. So The Ultimate Investment, tell people more about that book. Where did that come from? Where is it now?
Well, I think, the question that I get asked all the time is, where's the best place to put money, or the best investment, or it's there? And I've always said the best investment entrepreneurs make is when they invest in themselves. And by the way, even if you don't own a business, David, it's a mindset, meaning you could work for somebody else and have that entrepreneurial mindset. It's a mindset. It's not necessarily having anything to do with being a business owner. And I think ultimately that's always where the best investments come. I always say, as I said, Bill Gates isn't going to say he's worth $110 billion because of his 401k plan and because he put some money in a 529 or a mutual fund. I'm not saying they're bad vehicles. I think they're probably terrific. But it's investing in yourself. And so that means whether it be investing in your business or some other operating company, that's where wealth is created. It can also mean if you work for somebody else, do you have the network? Do you have the technique? Do you have the education to get that next promotion or the next job? And I think one of my jobs as a key business strategist and financial advisor and critical thinker is I need to see you where you are. I need to see where is David? Where's David right now? But I think the gift is to be able to see people at their highest purpose and to be able to envision them. And you want to believe in them so viscerally that they believe in themselves.
Yeah.
That ultimately, I think what people need, that in an entrepreneurial world, it's pretty lonely out there. And they need people like you out there, David, and hopefully folks like us that believe in them, that believe that, and you don't know how powerful that is, the belief you have in somebody, because once you believe in them, they'll believe in themselves.
Yep.
And I don't mean to look at things in a rose-colored glasses or Pollyannish or you're 5'2" and you're going to be in the NBA as the next or something something ridiculous like that. But I think the idea is, for most people in that world, it's amazing how being able to see them and envision them for their highest best purpose is the magic elixir, the differential from incredible success to potentially even failure.
You're exactly right. I remember when when I had my agency a few years ago, it almost felt like the only people that understood me and understood what was happening in my life and my world were other entrepreneurs that could say, there's no check coming in. The people on my team aren't getting paid if I don't go make a sale. The things that you have to deal with, how 8 to 5 just completely goes out the window and doesn't matter anymore. And just, it's incredibly lonely. I mean, being an entrepreneur by yourself, trying to grow it as just you, is incredibly lonely. And that's one of the things that we've tried to kind of cultivate here, locally here down in Dallas as well, is just trying to find that network of entrepreneurs to say, look, yes, it's lonely. Yes, there's a lot of times when you're going to talk and your spouse is going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But that's okay, because you're not by yourself. There's a whole group of us here that understand what it's like when you wake up and you're like, I don't even know where to start today. Today's not like yesterday, and it won't be like tomorrow. 17 things behind me are on fire, and it's just me. It's a whole different thing, but I think you're right. It's not looking at it through rose-colored lenses. It's just having somebody say, look, I get it. When you want to talk, I'm here. I believe in you. Let's bounce ideas off of each other. It's literally just somebody that speaks the language.
And it's also trusting on the other side too, is that you have to have permission to be able to coach somebody and do it in a loving way. But I think, sometimes also when you become very successful, everyone, like, you're beautiful, baby. David, you're the best. You're a magic man, or whatever. And sometimes you can turn into the emperor has no clothes. In the sense that you're getting to that place. And I think you as an entrepreneur should appreciate people around you and creating a cadre of people that won't bring you down, but will tell you the truth and will help you, because, ultimately, when you have people that have your best interest at heart, and no other agenda, and when they tell you something, you better pay attention to it, because, they're not doing it to hurt you, they're doing it to help you. And I think that's sometimes when you can get in trouble, is you start, I always say, when you start believing your own BS, the world has a way of telling you you're not all that. And, they knock gently at first and then a little harder. And by the third or fourth time, they're going to get knocked on your you-know-what. So, I think you ought to heed that advice, or at least listen to it and evaluate it.
Yep, I think you're spot on. Well, Mark, this has been fantastic. Let people know how they can keep up with you, follow you, find your book, learn everything else that they need to know.
Well, you can find our book at Amazon or virtually any retailer that sells Books a Million, or Barnes and Noble. But I was going to say they can reach me at Mark with a K, Mark_Murphy at northeastprivateclient.com. And we would love the opportunity to continue the conversation. And David, I just appreciate you, and thank you for your time, and thank you for spending some time with me tonight, because I enjoyed every minute of it.
Absolutely. Same thing here. And I'll make sure that all of that is linked in the description, so it makes it super easy for people to find. But Mark, it's been a privilege, and thank you so much for taking your time this evening.
Thank you, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. Before you go, be sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button to be notified when the next episode comes out. Until next time.